All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. This is your morning tropical update. We continue to watch what is now Tropical Storm Nicole swirling off the coast of Florida with an imminent landfall for the Sunshine State coming Wednesday night into early Thursday. We are watching for the potential for tropical storm conditions up and down the coast and potentially some hurricane conditions for parts of the east coast of Florida. Nicole may be the first hurricane to make impact on the U.S. in the month of November since Kate in 1985, only the fourth one on record, and would be the first direct strike on the east coast of Florida since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. So we are definitely in some rare company with this one, and a very unusual late season storm is taking aim at the coast of Florida. So we're going to be talking about this morning. This is a quick morning update video. We're also going to have a regional Northeast Florida update video coming for you this morning. So if you live in Northeast Florida, we're going to talk something. You'll kind of see some stuff from Northeast Florida in here, but definitely we're going to drill down on those impacts for our area as I live there in a subsequent video. So let's go ahead and get right into it this morning. National Hurricane Center's morning advisory at 10 a.m. Maximum sustained winds in Nicole are 50 miles an hour. She's now a fully tropical storm. She did make that transition. It's mostly just for weather jargon, but no longer subtropical storm Nicole and is now fully tropical in nature, although it still has some characteristics of a subtropical storm, like a much bigger wind field, for example. Nicole has actually made that transition. She's a tropical storm now. The movement to the west at 9 miles an hour, but it is going to become more of a southwest motion here tonight as we get into Wednesday, and then we're going to watch that recurve Wednesday night as Nicole begins to bend back to the north and recurve into the coast of Florida. Now, right now, the landfall point has begun to shift a bit further north. We were expecting more West Palm Beach, Lake Okeechobee area. Hurricane Center's forecast track now comes in somewhere south of the Space Coast, but north of Lake Okeechobee. And some models are even potentially suggesting that we could see this on the more northern end of the cone, somewhere around Cape Canaveral, or even maybe points a bit further north towards like Flagler and Volusia counties possible. So the final track is not sort of set in stone. It is a delicate timing dance between that trough coming to get Nicole and how fast she actually moves in and how strong that bend in the track is. Is it this pronounced, or is it more of like a lazy just kind of push into the coast? And then how far does Nicole drive into Florida before she turns north? Now, these things matter to a point, but they're kind of inconsequential in the grand scheme. This is a big storm. There's big wind impacts coming for the whole state of Florida. And unless you live in deep South Florida, the Keys, or way out in the Panhandle, you're going to be getting a tropical storm out of this. Notice how the tropical storm watches have been issued for the entire west, or most of the west coast of Florida, from like Appalachia Bay down to about the Fort Myers area, and then northward all the way into South Carolina. We have tropical storm watches this morning, and all the way down towards Miami. And then hurricane warnings are in effect for much of the central east coast of Florida, from about the Flagler County line down to about Hollandale Beach, and tropical storm warnings extend up towards Jacksonville and a little bit further south, and then they also extend pretty far inland as well. So there's definitely a lot of watches and warnings associated with Nicole, and some big impacts are coming. Again, on the current forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, we do expect this to make landfall sometime early Thursday morning, like before sunrise, probably late Wednesday night. Just after midnight is likely going to be the landfall time. You can see by 7 a.m. Thursday, Hurricane Center has this inland, and that may not even be quick enough. They may have to back that up a little bit or extend that, speed that timeline up a little bit. Some models bring it in earlier than that. But regardless of early Thursday morning, Nicole makes landfall as a hurricane somewhere around the central east coast of Florida. We think that about 75, 85 miles an hour is probably the cap on this storm. That's probably the hard ceiling on the storm. We really don't expect it to be much stronger than that right now. Um, but you definitely have the potential for a hurricane on your hands here. We are fairly confident that it is going to get to that intensity before landfall. Nicole does make a recurve, and it's going to be moving at a good clip. Notice how fast it's moving. By Friday, you've already got this thing almost into South Carolina. So it's going to be moving at a good clip. This is going to be a pretty quick, it's going to be a pretty good hit. I mean, there's going to be a lot of wind and rain associated with this. And again, those impacts can be felt well north of the center. I want to stress that enough. Like, south of the center, you don't have to go too far south of the center to get into better weather. But then, because you have this nor'easter kind of playing in, I'll show you one of the computer models here as Nicole moves in. There's this big sprawling high pressure to the north on the model. This is really pinching that wind in. So you've got like your finger on the fire hose, essentially, or the water hose at your house, and you put your finger over the top of it and let just some water through, and it goes really fast. That little pressure difference. It's kind of what you're doing with the weather here. You have a low pressure here, high pressure here, and those winds are screaming between the two. And this is something most tropical storms don't typically have. You don't normally have a nor'easter and a tropical storm at the same time, but we do in this case, and that's why you're going to have a lot of impacts well north of where Nicole makes landfall, not just around the center of the storm. You're going to have like center of the storm, and then well north of the center of the storm is where a lot of heavy wind and rainfall can be expected. So this is the latest on the guidance for the track models. They are actually showing that more northward trend on the track. The Hurricane Center hasn't quite jumped up with them yet, but they said they're kind of watching it. They're going to see what the GFS and Euro do this afternoon. GFS and Euro remain on the south side of the track forecast guidance. Hurricane Center is kind of splitting the difference right now. We'll see what the afternoon model runs do come up with. Intensity models are still mostly behind schedule. Most of them still think it's going to stay in the tropical storm force range, but the Hurricane Center sees something these models don't, and they are calling for Category 1, and I like that call. Like it more than I did yesterday because Nicole was coming together nicely today, and that's going to be something to watch for, but likely, again, going to be a hurricane at landfall and then move up out of here. Let's talk about impacts. You have potential for rainfall, 3 to 5 inches of rain for much of the state of Florida. You are talking about a pretty hefty amount of the peninsula of Florida is going to see a good at least 2 to 4 inches of rain, probably 3 to 5 closer to the coast, and then in more north central Florida and northeast Florida, potential for even more rain than that. Some pockets, down around Daytona Beach or Cape Canaveral, again, wherever you're just north of where that landfall point is where the heaviest rain will be focused. That could be locally up to 6 to 9, even maybe 10 inches of rain. But then in a more broad brush sense, you're talking about 3 to 5 for a lot of the state of Florida. This is not like some prolific, like life-shattering amount of rain, but it's enough to cause some localized issues, some low-lying flooding, and of course the coastal flooding, creeks and rivers, things like that are going to have experienced some flooding associated with Nicole, especially with that onshore flow. Wind gust forecast, I'll show you a couple right here. GFS showing the potential for wind gusts, well into hurricane force, of course, where the center were to come ashore. But notice how far north some of the big wind gusts extend, all the way into parts of southeast Georgia, where potential for wind gusts over 50 miles an hour are possible. Northern Florida definitely can see wind gusts north of 50 miles an hour sometimes, probably pushing 60 in some cases, especially near the coast. And then, of course, where that core of the stronger winds comes ashore, those hurricane force wind gusts may extend into central Florida, even toward the Orlando area or points around that region. The National Digital Forecast Database also shows that as well, potential for 55, 60 plus mile an hour wind gusts in northern Florida and along the coastline, where hurricane force wind gusts over 70, 75 miles an hour are very likely. This model has less wind gusts elsewhere, but I would say that this is probably a better call for wind gusts elsewhere in the 40s for a large swath of the peninsula of Florida and much of southern Georgia as well. Again, really only the way out in the panhandle and way south of Nicole is where the relief will be from the winds. Again, it's going to be a big wind event for the coast, not like tremendously strong like an actual hurricane, like a Hurricane Ian or something, but just in the sense of how many people are going to get this kind of wind and how long it's going to last. It's going to be a pretty windy event. European model on the lower end of the guidance. I think this will come up, but again, even the European showing the potential for wind gusts well over 50 miles an hour up and down the coastline, even in parts of southeast Georgia. Coastal flooding is going to be the primary concern with Nicole. In a lot of cases, 3 to 5 foot of storm surge coming for almost the entire peninsula of Florida from North Palm Beach all the way up into southeast Georgia. Some water rise is possible on the west coast too, especially if she drives further out and then makes that turn. And then the mouth of the St. Johns River could be experiencing some significant flooding, and in a lot of the points north and south. Again, 5 foot of storm surge is no joke, and this storm is going to be pushing a lot of water. It has a very big wind field, so just because it's a Category 1 hurricane does not mean it's not going to produce some really hefty coastal impacts and cause a lot of beach erosion, coastal flooding, surge, all that stuff that comes along with it is going to be a big deal. So that's what I got for you guys this morning on the broad brush update. We are going to have more for the Northeast Florida area shortly, so stay tuned for that if you're interested in that. Otherwise, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll have more tonight. We'll have another video this evening. So until then, thanks for watching, and have a good one.